So I do want to get underway here and pass the floor over to our speaker, Ryan St. Germaine. Ryan is a tech entrepreneur who co-founded and led bcjobs.ca and Jobcast. He was an early adopter of the remote work culture and has years of experience recruiting, coaching, and leading a team for sales, marketing, UI and UX, design, data science, software development, customer success, and support. He's a good friend of the Board of Trade. We've known Ryan for a number of years, and we're really pleased to have him share some of his thoughts and experiences as we all look to how managing our teams and our strategies going forward is going to look like as we transition into yet another stage of our pandemic workforce. So Ryan, I'm going to pass it over to you, and the floor is yours.
Sounds good. Thanks, Corey. Thanks, everybody. It's exciting to be here. Yeah, I've been doing this for a long time, and I love working remotely, and it's something that we use as a competitive advantage early on. And then it's been really interesting to watch things unfold with the pandemic, where people have been kind of forced to move into this world of virtual, oftentimes against their will. And it actually kind of happened to us a little bit against our will as well, too, in the beginning at one point. So I'm going to share kind of our journey in how we started remote, moved away from it, and then went back to it. And then I'm going to kind of break down through sort of some of the building blocks of any company, and then sort of how we would manage those different sections within a virtual setting. We are very fortunate in that all of our business can be done online, but I would say that even companies that have frontline staff, I think they can take a lot of lessons learned from working remotely and see where it makes sense to have people on site and where you can actually be a little bit more flexible in that. And so without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. I just realized I'm not even sharing it, am I? Now let's make sure I do the right screen. All right. Can everybody see my screen? Maybe just get a couple of hand waves there.
Yep, looks good on my end, Ryan.
All right, cool. And let's get, I'll get everyone out of the way here so you're not looking at your faces. I know okay. So just to start out, let's talk. So as Corey mentioned, I co-founded BC Jobs in 2001, went on to be the largest career site in Western Canada. We were partnered with BC Tech Association we're a technology partner for the Chartered Professional Accountants and Biotech and a number of other tech associations. 2011 co-founded Jobcast, which is a social recruiting app, was finalist for Startup of the Year. We ran the largest tech career fairs in BC, as well as a lot of really great panel events. And then in 2020, we exited those businesses. Very fortunate timing. We exited February of 2020, so that you don't get any luckier than that. If anyone asks, I'm brilliant and timed it perfectly. But
managing pandemics and forecasting those are going to be our next seminar with Ryan.
Yeah. Yeah. Dumb luck, maybe. So I'm going to take you way back. Johnny, my business partner, started BC Jobs as a project. He had no intention of commercializing it. He was a student at UBC, started coding in the evenings, and he built this really great platform. Showed it to me, and I said, hey, you know what? I'm not doing anything right now. I had quit a sales job and was on my way to Korea to train in Taekwondo. And so I started making calls from my apartment. Johnny was on residence at UBC. And so he was coding, I was calling. We started to get traction. Johnny graduated and went on to do what he was training to do, become a mechanical engineer. And I grew BC Jobs. Eventually, Johnny came back. But we were doing this all remotely, and then we started to have success. And so what do you do when you have success? We grew, we hired a software development team because I needed someone to replace Johnny. We had another software developer come on. We had an office manager, support, sales, and we were growing. I think at this point, we got to about $800,000 in revenue. And then this happened. So 2008, 2009, market crash, really horrible place to be if you're a job board. A lot of businesses suffered at that time. And so similar, I think, to COVID, some businesses have done really well during COVID. Others have had a really hard time. So we needed to make some adjustments. And one of the things that I love to ask frontline staff and of myself on a regular basis is, what should we stop doing? What should we keep doing? And what should we start doing? So what should we stop doing? We had to look at our P&L. I know there's a couple accountants on the call here. So, when you're bleeding and things are going well, when your revenue is almost half, you have to make some really hard decisions. So we had to let go of an office manager. We had to let go of a software developer, some great people. And we also had to look at our infrastructure and go, wow, we're spending, thousands of dollars a month. We've got, computer systems that are networked and cost, valuable resources to maintain as well as to own. And so we decided that we would get rid of our office. Anything that we had to keep doing had to be core to our business. So we looked at, what are the things that we do that only we can do? And really our brand promise was to find candidates, qualified local candidates for employers in BC. So everything that we did that we maintained was around doing that well. And what should we start doing? Anything that wasn't core, we were going to outsource, we were going to automate it, or we were just going to stop doing it. And so that sort of, came out of necessity. And I think a lot of people have felt that during COVID. You've had this necessity to say, you know what, like we can't do things the way that we're doing right now. Maybe our revenues change, maybe our clients' needs have changed, or maybe, everything's going really well, but the wheels are coming off because none of our systems work in a virtual world. And so we moved to these tools. I don't think there's any of these that are groundbreaking at this point. Back then, these were quite new. Everyone was still using a lot of physical infrastructure. But we basically created a system whereby we could operate anywhere. And I think that's really important because it's not as much whether you have a physical location or you don't have a physical location, it's being able to operate from anywhere. So you can have shared office space, you can have an office space, you can have, team members that work remotely, team workers that like to come in. We ended up getting a shared office and we had a number of people that like to work from the shared office, but we had a lot of people that like to work from home. Software developers don't like, they want to just be on their computer a lot of the time. And so this made us realize that, this is a huge opportunity, right? I think our first year, 2008, 2009, we were just scrambling. We were looking at our business and going, oh my God, the wheels are coming off. What do we do? But we stopped the bleeding, the world didn't end, things started to get a little bit better. And then, after about a year, we started to realize, wow, we are really efficient. Johnny and I ended up having to do a lot of things. And because we had to do everything, we made it a lot better, right? We had another software developer, we had some support, but it was a lot of the critical work came down to us. So we ended up automated everything. We got very selective in what we chose to do, and we got a ton better. And as a result, the economy improved, but we also improved. We were way more profitable. Our business grew. We also had time to think. So we started a company called Jobcast, which was finalist for Startup of the Year in 2015. It was getting thousands of installs a month from people all over the world. And so we needed to kind of grow up as a company, right? We'd run this very small company, and we were still really small. We were a very lean operation, but very, very profitable. And at that time, we also realized that we weren't encumbered by location, so we could hire people all over the world. And we ended up bringing on, this is Sam, she was our comms manager, and Leaf was our UI UX expert. And they're from Vancouver, but they're expats. They moved to the Netherlands, Utrecht, and we didn't want to lose them. So we realized, hey, you know what? We don't need to let these guys go, or we don't need to end this relationship. It was a bit of a beast, I'm not going to lie. We had to we had to work with a 9-hour time difference. That was a little bit tough. So, if you are managing teams in multiple locations or working with contractors, be cognizant, only do one time difference, because if you do a few, that's, you're never going to sleep. And so that started out our world of hiring people in a remote setting. So Dimitry was a Russian guy who had moved to Canada, was a Canadian citizen, and then moved on to Seattle. We didn't want to lose him. Devin was from Winnipeg, but living in Mexico. Yakub. So we were able to find really great resources wherever it made sense. Dimitry just seemed to know everybody, so he would just be like, oh, I got a guy for that. So that was pretty amazing. And as we grew up as a business, we realized none of these are really too groundbreaking, but we knew we needed to get better at these in a virtual setting. So, how do we articulate our vision and keep everybody aligned? How do we manage people and keep everybody engaged in a remote setting? How do we manage our data and measure what's important? When you're working remotely, your process needs to get better. You need to be able to communicate better, both visually and in written. Maybe I need to learn how to do that better, and that didn't come out right. Anyways, how do you resolve issues, and how do you identify issues when you're in a remote setting? Because sometimes things can get lost in the cracks. And how do you execute from remote? So, oh, I'm going the wrong way. And this is kind of how you visualize it. This is not mine. This is Jim Collins, and I think it's been repeated in just about every other business book. There's, you know, some really great reads, Good to Great, Scaling Up by Vern Harnish, and Entrepreneurial Operating System are great methodologies. And a lot of them are saying the same thing, to be honest. I think, you know, if you want to write a book, you need to come up with your own vernacular. So what's really important for me with this is that I need to have a vision. I need to have a big, hairy, audacious goal farther along, and then I need to build towards it, right? The BHAG might not always be right, but I think if you have something that's kind of audacious that you're going for, it helps you align what you're going to do next. What are you going to do tomorrow? What are you going to do in the next quarter? These quarterly rocks that we'll talk about later become really important. The strategic things that you do to grow your business, not work on your business, right? So, you know, there's a difference between, you know, working in your business and working on your business. So if you're just doing the day-to-day and you're not thinking, you'll probably stay the same. But if you start strategically looking at what are the 3 to 7 things each quarter I can do to move my business towards the top of the mountain, that's super helpful, or was super helpful for me. And if you give me 2 more years at BC Jobs, I might've gotten this perfect, but it was really nowhere close to that. As we got better at it, you know, I'm an operator, I'm not a consultant by nature. So, you know, like I just did the things that I needed to do to improve my business. And by the way, if you try to do all of this at once, you will drive your team insane. So, you know, worst thing you can do is like give people 20 meetings, a whole bunch of new stuff to do. So bite-sized chunks. And so BC Jobs, our BHAG was, you know, would be kind of small for some, but I mean, we're bcjobs.ca. Jobcast had another, right? But, you know, by nature, BC Jobs, BC. So we wanted to have the largest market cap for British Columbia. And that means we needed to compare ourselves to national players and kind of analyze, you know, what portion of their revenue would be in British Columbia. So that was our initial big, hairy, audacious goal. And then it changed eventually to selling bcjobs.ca, which I'm not going to lie was a little awkward. I'm a pretty transparent leader. So to be selling your business where you're and not be able to share that with your team, which I love to share with my team, was really tough. But I'm very proud about how we did that and at the end outcome. And so these are our core values. I will say that with core values, you know, none of this stuff is virtual yet, but bear with me. Core values have to come from the founders, in my opinion. And I was lucky that I had a really core group of people that I knew kind of had these values, whether we'd articulated them or not. So I did a rough draft. I shared them with my team. Delina on my team made them way better than I ever could. But I think the feeling of it needs to come from the founders, and they need to attract people that fit that culture. You know, diverse teams, you know, I'm Métis, so, you know, definitely very big on multicultural diverse teams. But at the same time, kind of have to be aligned with the vision and the purpose. And BC Jobs, I think we cared, this was something that was common before we figured out how to word it, but we care about seeing people in their company succeed when we connect job seekers and employers. And marketing strategy, I won't go into too much detail with this, but this took time. I'm going to say, like, you know, there's a lot of great books on this. So EOS, Scaling Up, these types of books are great for getting that right if you're struggling in some of those areas. But having it was super important because it aligned and informed all the decisions that we made, and it helped everybody to understand what we were trying to do. And here's some templates for this. This is the OPSP, the one-page strategic plan. It's from Scaling Up. There's nothing really crazy here. It's just basically visualizing all the pieces that I've shown you already. And there's another version of BTO. And so if you look up BTO or OPSP, you will find templates on this online. So, you know, I'm a big fan of templates. Most things have been done already. So, and speaking of templates, these were kind of designed more for print, or this is an Excel version. I am a huge fan of Trello. I don't know if is anyone using Trello? Maybe, I don't know if you can show hands on there, but if anyone's using it, then it'd be interesting to know. This is a great tool for you to take all the things that you've done in a real world setting and move it online. And I love having everything in one place. You can attach documents to this. You can move things around. So all of these different things can be moved to different boards. It's super flexible. It allows your team to collaborate and coordinate efforts. And you can also use whiteboarding. So I think Tessa mentioned how she hated Miro. I think once you get to know Miro, it's not that bad. It is a little bit, most design-based tools are a little weird if you haven't used them before. And once you figure out how to use one, they all start to make sense. So I highly recommend getting familiar with these tools. A lot of this stuff is cultural. How do you take what you're doing in the real world and take it online? How do you learn more about these tools? And it doesn't happen overnight. So we'll talk about people next and maybe how to tie those tools together. By the way, if anyone has any questions, feel free to, Corey, if you see anything come up, feel free to let me know, and I'll try to stay on track here.
Yeah, sounds good. People, you can throw them into the chat box, and I'll interject where it might make sense, or if it doesn't, we'll save them to the end. Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you. So I wanted to start out with fun. I think, virtual setting is kind of weird, right? Like we've all suffered through not being able to see people through COVID, and I don't think anybody wants that. So if you have a team that you can get together with, I think it's nice to do that when you can, when it's, I see brighter days ahead. And so a lot of the things that we did, we tried to bake in times where our local team could get together and have a good time together, could get to know each other. But we realized that if you're just going to be staring in front of a computer, you might as well do that at home, right? I think there's different use cases that make sense for right people, right seat. This is nothing new. I think all organizations kind of look for culture ads and kind of look to make sure that the people who are within their company get it, want it, and have the capacity to do the work. So we'll talk a little about that. And then sort of training for skills and having a champion within your organization that can help. If you have a technically advanced organization, great. If you have some people that are maybe struggling now in the new world, how do you get them up to speed? How do you help them to achieve their goals? And so here is fun. So we used to get out every quarter. We're a pretty adventurous bunch. If you look on the top right, there's Logan bungee jumping. My lawyers, I think there's a lawyer and an accountant on the line here, and maybe somebody in HR. So our HR consultant and our lawyer both advised us that we would give out an activities budget and people would decide what they wanted to do with that budget. So we did not take our team bungee jumping. They chose to go bungee jumping, but we had a lot of fun, and we would do that on a regular basis so that we could just hang out and get to know each other. We also had events baked into what we did. So we would host career experts panels, sales panels, number of different talent events. So that allowed us to get out and hang out on a regular basis. And all members of our team, didn't matter if you're a software developer, support, or whatever, we just all come hang out and support each other at the events and have some fun, some food. And then giving back contribution was something that was big to us. So we would get out and do group sorts. And we actually extended that to our meetup. So everybody in our meetup would come out and do group sorts. I'm not suggesting you start a meetup, but I think if you can find ways to, this is our shared office. If you can find just ways to get things in your calendar, everybody has a different culture. Everyone does things in a different way. Like what's going to be fun for your team, kind of ask around, but get it in the calendar and think about the year, right? Because it gets really easy to say that we're going to do something next week. And I've had times where we didn't get together and we didn't hang out. But it's really important for us. It was really important to have things in the calendar on a consistent basis. And this one here, I don't know if anyone's ever had a meeting, I'm sure you have, where like half your team was working remotely and half your team was working in a group setting together. But it's absolutely awful to be the remote team where everybody is like got visual cues and everybody's sort of discussing things in a way that that you don't understand, you can't see. Maybe there's inside jokes or information being shared. So I think it's fine if you want to have groups come into the office together, but if there's going to be even one person working remotely, just have everybody on a computer using the tools that you use to collaborate. And it also makes it easier just to keep everything in one place. Here is a people analyzer. So I'm going through a lot of info here. And again, I'm happy to share the deck with you afterwards. This is something that I just grabbed online. It's the EOS, which I'm pretty fond of these days. I used to use the one-page plan, but the entrepreneurial operating system has some really great tools. And this is just a way to sort of measure and scorecard your team and just see, like, is everybody, plus minus, or, if they represent this thing 50% of the time, you can do, a plus minus in the box, or just a plus or a minus if they have it or if they don't have it. But do they meet your core values? Do they get it, want it, and have the capacity to? And then use this as a training tool to work with your team and to get everybody up to speed. So once you get good at your culture and things like that, you will actually decide to hire and fire based on it. So it's really important to help your team to grow and such when you're utilizing these tools. And then championing online learning. I don't know if you've got somebody on your team that's really good at technology and really good at these things, then I think that person can become the champion of your group. But it's been my experience, it's not a matter of information. Like, we all know there's just an abundance of information on everything now. Anything you want to possibly learn is available. It becomes a matter of curation. So, what do people need to learn in order to do their jobs well, in order to communicate in a remote setting? And, LinkedIn Learning, which used to be Lynda, will give you free access to all of their tools if you've got a Burnaby Public Library card or Vancouver Public Library card. So, it doesn't have to be expensive training. You just have to tell people the tools that they're going to need to use and show them some really good resources for how to get better at them. And then give people the time to actually learn them. Is it the Pomodoro technique? 25 minutes is the optimal amount of time to learn something or to stay focused at something. Give somebody 25 minutes a few times a week and give them a list of different tutorials that they can use to help to better communicate with your team. You'd be amazed what starts to happen after a month. Things start to get automated. They start to get more efficient. People start to collaborate with each other and chat more. And so here's some YouTube videos. If you want to do EOS, there's a bunch of 5-minute clips that will show you how to run better meetings, show you how to organize your teams and things like that. I am actually going to share this Trello clip because this will kind of show you, if you're not using it, some of the things that you can do with it. Also, just wanted to illustrate, Trello has every tutorial available online. So if you want to learn anything about Trello, you can watch a bunch of 5-minute clips to get really good at it, right? And you can do that with almost any software tool that you want to use.
All right, team, let's use Trello to get this taco truck on the road. I'm going to set up a Trello board to plan the project. We got our chef, food buyer, marketing, and design all on the board. We can always invite more as we go. Let's all make some lists so we can see the status of everything that needs to get done. That should cover it for now. We can all add cards for our individual tasks. Nice. This card is for our most delicious task. Can't wait to see the menu. And can you two make a list of produce we'll need? We should aim for all taco ingredients by Tuesday, for obvious reasons. I'll add a due date and a reminder real quick. Let's move these from to-do to doing so everyone can see where we're at. Looks like we have signage ready for the truck. Let's check it out. Theo, I love these colors. Checking these off. Ooh, let's move this task to done. In fact, we can automate that. Now any cards with completed checklists will automatically move to done. There we go. I got a good feeling about this. I'll add another list to plan where we can go next.
Okay, I think you guys get the point on that, so I'll cut that a little bit short. But great tool. By the way, most of the tools that I'm mentioning, they're free or very dirt cheap to use. So there's no reason to not be able to adopt some of these. Try to do as few tools as possible. It becomes really easy to be overwhelmed with the amount of tools you're using. But if you can find 3 or 4 that work really well for you, then you'll be much further ahead.
Ryan, quick question, if I could, on the education thing. About trying to, is that something that you would suggest, or that you did build in as, I expect you to do a webinar a week or a webinar a month on different skills, or you kind of, or is it passive where you just encourage people to do it? So I imagine many businesses would see that you'd have different uptake depending on how you approach that learning piece.
Yeah, and I think it really does depend on your team as well too. So one of the things that we did when we were onboarding is any of the tools that we had that people were going to be using on a regular basis, we would provide some of the tutorials and give them time to learn them. And then we would have conversations about it afterwards and just show them how we used it within our team. So I do think it depends on the individual, but having a culture of learning and developing that over time. Cultural change is slow. So if people don't want to learn tools, then like trying to bombard them with a bunch right away is probably going to be tough. But maybe you can just do like a sit down where you just have everybody watch something together for 20 minutes. And then that's pretty easy. And maybe instead of saying, hey, we're going to do this forever, it's something like, hey, maybe we try this for for a month and see how it works, right? Like let's sort of work on this a little bit. But I do think, you know, for us, continuous improvement was a core value that we had. So we were always trying to get better, and our team members were always kind of seeking this kind of thing out. So it was a little bit more informal. At the beginning, we had some videos that we had curated that we said, hey, these are a good idea to check these out because these are the tools that we use. I'm always a big fan, like why would I sit there and tell somebody something that they can watch in a five-minute YouTube video, right? So, you know, I think sometimes you can save time, especially if you're working remotely as well too. It's just an easy way to get somebody up to speed on something. And you can do that with email drip as well too. You can have like, we would have, I'm going to talk a little bit about process later, but we had have formatted onboarding so that when people came on to work with our company as a contractor or as a full-time employee, we would send out messages that sort of told them step by step kind of some of the things, and we would drip it so we weren't sending them a whole book of information at one time. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so if you're finding that your team is really maybe having a little bit of challenge, a lot of teams that really, you know, aren't used to working in a virtual environment or haven't had to rely on tools to the extent that that maybe other companies have. And so one of the things that I've been really successful with is just hiring really smart people that are in college and university. And this is pocketed, but BBOT, I know you guys have lists of all the different grant funding available right now. So there are, you know, a lot of available resources that are very inexpensive. A lot of it is funded by grants. And so, you know, bring in really smart people. Jasmine in the top left, automated and canned messages, all of our customer service and support. We used a tool called Intercom, and she just create canned messages for everything. So every future hire that came in just had to do a drop down and choose from one of the different canned messages we had. There was no real thinking involved unless a new problem came up. And if it happened enough times, we would automate it. Nikita fixed our sales process. Venkatesh was a master's student at SFU. He came on and helped us visualize a lot of our key performance indicators. And Lucas helped us build an app. So a lot of great resources available. And then if you want to improve as a company, have technical people hang out with your non-technical people, because they'll get really frustrated, right? They'll start looking at what you're doing. They'll go, why are you doing that? And they'll say, did you not know you could do this? Hopefully they'll do it, you know, in a nice way. But hanging out with my software development team has made me a hell of a lot better because I frustrate them until they say, why don't you do it this way, man? So speaking of data, how do you collect and really like, how do you do this in a virtual setting? How do you store things in a way where you're not repeating things? So collections become pretty easy. You know, we've all got websites and different online tools that have data, but it became really important for us to figure out what was important to measure to cut through the noise. And then how do we automate a lot of that information so that we don't have, I hate seeing people do a lot of manual work. So if you see people that are spending a lot of time with paper in your organization, people who are taking data from one place and manually typing it into another place repeatedly, right? People who are repetitively answering the same questions over and over again. These are all like indications that you're doing things in an inefficient way, right? There's free or dirt cheap tools available that will allow you to move data from place to place and automate processes. You just need to work with people that have some of these skill sets and trust them to fix your processes for you. So KPIs for BC jobs, there's a lot here. I'm not gonna go too deep into this, but just what I'm trying, this is a horrible slide, but what I'm trying to show you here, actually, maybe it's a good slide because, you know, data was a mess. We had so much data, right? We had all these things and we need to break down what was important for us to measure. And then we needed to put it, initially we just used an Excel sheet. You know, it was somebody manually on the team once a month. Process for me is always manual first, then, you know, create templates and then automate it whenever possible. And so we started with a Google sheet or an Excel sheet that would be done monthly. All the information would be collected. And then eventually we started creating dashboards. I had software developers, so I had secret weapons and they would do a lot of that automation for me. But you know, just as simple, you know, we were talking about accounting earlier on. So we started out, our accounting it was on a laptop, it was on a desktop computer. We had to take that with us to do our accounting. It was awful. And a lot of companies still run this way. If you are, please stop. I know there's risks involved with doing things online, but you can mitigate that risk. And we got to the point where, instead of getting caught up every month or two after, we were doing our accounting in real time. We had all of our online payments being sent into our accounting system. It was two-way compatible, so any change was reflected right away. And what was taking an office manager 20 to 30 hours a month, a week to do, we were doing in about 4 to 5 hours a month with Johnny and I reconciling credit cards. So if you get really good at accounting and data management, your life gets a lot easier and you get much more profitable because you're not spending money on all these resources. We also got really good at visualizing what was important to us. We knew our cost of goods sold really well. Simple Numbers is a great book, or talk to your accountant. They're great. And if you involve them in conversations that aren't just around bookkeeping, you'll find some really interesting nuggets. And automation and visualization, I've talked about that earlier, but there's tools that allow you to visualize things. So these are just a laundry list, and I'm happy to chat with you about specific ones if you like. Feel free to reach out to me. Tools like PySync and Zapier will allow you to move data from one place to another. All of these systems interconnect, so there's no reason why you can't have things showing up where you want them with a little bit of effort. Okay, so moving on. I hope nobody's falling asleep here. I do realize I'm giving a lot of information, and so I kind of wanted to give an overview here of some of the things that we looked at. If you want a little bit of a deeper dive, I'm happy to chat with you about some of the different areas, and I'm happy to share resources. I'm happy to curate some information for you on specific areas. So if you have something you're interested in, you'd like some more information, just feel free to email me.
Thanks, Ryan. And just, we had a couple of questions that we will be sharing. We are recording this. We'll be sharing the recording if you wanted to go back and see a little bit more information around Trello or any of the tools that you missed, kind of one of the ones that was mentioned. We'll be sharing the recording so you can go back and see what what Ryan was talking about. And you mentioned, Ryan, that you're happy to share the deck, so people want to kind of dig into some of the suggested tools. They can do that if they didn't take notes while they were going through it.
Awesome. I'm going to move this over so I can see you guys without looking completely sideways. There we go. Okay, so again, in a virtual setting, sometimes it's easy for things to get missed. So like you can have issues going on in your company and you don't know about it. So we'll talk about meeting structure later, but just having issues in one place so everybody can see it. This is straight out of EOS again, by the way. How do you, creating an issues list on Trello. So you've seen Trello, you just create a long list of issues. So that you can identify, discuss, and solve them as a group. And usually it becomes down to the identification and agreeing on what the problem is. So finding ways to do that in a collaborative way. And so here's what an idea list would look like on Trello. And you can reorder these. So like, if you guys are talking and you decide one's more important than the other, you just move them up and down on the list. Or you could have a issues to do, issues doing list and separate it that way. So you've got a third one and then have a done one so everything gets moved over. But really, when you start these meetings, and I'll talk about it a little bit earlier, you're just trying to figure out, is this a quick fix? How do we solve this permanently? Is this a quick fix? Can we do it right away? Is this going to require a little bit more work? Do we need to move it into a quarterly rock, something we're going to break down into smaller chunks? Or do we need to move it to the bottom of the list and worry about it later? All right, but you're always kind of moving things around. And eventually, if you're doing this on a weekly basis, your company won't have any more problems, right? And your quarterly and your annual meetings will get a hell of a lot easier because you'll have solved most of your problems already and you'll be able to become a lot more strategic. And so process, documented, followed by all, and automated. So we've already touched on a lot of these things here, but I'll just sort of break it down. Like our company, it was tech, it was marketing, it was customer support. These were kind of some of the key areas within our business, and whatever yours are, it really just comes down to looking like where are the biggest holes right now, where are things falling apart, and then diving in there. What's costing us a lot of money, right? How can we make this more efficient? So the tech team was pretty amazing. My business partner and CTO, Johnny, was a product and project manager, and they had an amazing process that they had set up. Marketing was a lot more checklist based and a lot more templated based. We found that we could just repeat things once we got good at it. So, events, I'll show you some templates soon. Support, we had, canned messaging for everything. And we rarely were on the phone because most problems were solved before it ever got to that. And people didn't want to talk to us. They didn't need to. They just go buy online and look for jobs online. Some things that we kind of all did, we were a small group, so we had processes and systems in place for all these different areas. Just to give you a couple examples, we would run a meetup every other month and a talent day every month. So Delina on our team had a checklist. This is within Trello again. I think I'm just doing a sales pitch for Trello today. So, we had, a list of everything that needed to be done, and we would just check those off as we went. And then as we got better at that, we could automate some of those processes so that there was less work to do. But we ran not as much as Corey ever did in his time in his heyday that I saw, but we ran a lot of events, and it went off like clockwork, and it didn't feel stressful to run them because we had systemized everything so that we knew people were going to show up. We knew there was going to be food. We knew there was going to be good speakers. Everything was done, and it was really straightforward. So onboarding, similarly, we were onboarding contractors and full-time employees in a remote setting. So how do you do that well? What tools do you need to give them? Obviously, there's privacy concerns when you're working remotely, so we want to adhere to that. We want to have signed contractor agreements. We wanted to choose carefully what type of information we gave to who. So that takes time. We weren't prepared to onboard people initially. We had to get better before we were able to do that and be comfortable doing it. Talent day, here's a template for the event. We would just copy this and adjust a few things. Job description, nothing, no news here. Hopefully you've got job descriptions for anyone you're hiring for regularly. But also choosing when you should hire and when you should outsource. Once you get really good at itemizing and prioritizing, and then automating and creating checklists and processes and procedures, sometimes it doesn't require your A players, right? Anything that's not core to your business, what can you outsource? A lot of people have mixed reviews on Upwork. I used Upwork a lot. I used iWorker quite a bit and Fiverr sometimes. And I found I had really great contractors that almost kind of shared our values and were really on board to help us out. So choosing, when to hire, when to outsource, when to automate processes. We talked about that earlier. So you can move data from one place to another and create rules for just about anything. And again, if you're getting stuck in process, every person I ever hired ended up creating the process for me, and then I would just tweak it afterwards. So have your people write down what they do so that if they ever leave, you have the tools in place to keep things running. And I'm getting close to the end here. Rocks. So rocks and meetings. So quarterly rocks are really just the strategic things that you do in your business that are really going to have an impact on changing and making your organization better, and are going to strategically help you to get to the next level. And how do you organize your teams in order to achieve the daily things, the weekly, the monthly, the quarterly, and the annual that you need to get up the mountain? And I'm going to give you an example of BC Jobs and one of the quarterly rocks that we had on our team. We were on an awful platform called Cold Fusion for our software development. So we built this in 2001. We thought that Cold Fusion was going to be the coding language of choice, and then it died. So we had this platform that was cumbersome. It didn't work all that well. We'd made it work really well for our online platform, but behind the scenes, things were a nightmare. And we decided to sell at this point. And we knew that nobody was going to buy this company if we were running on Cold Fusion. Didn't matter how profitable we were, we still didn't have the tools to scale it. So we had to move to .NET Core. And that's like changing the engine while the car's running. We've got 200,000 visitors coming through a month to our website, and we can't just shut it down. It's going to take 18 months to change it out. We came up with a strategy. Johnny's brilliant. He said, you know what, I'm going to chunk this out. We're going to do different components of our site, and we're going to break that into smaller projects, which became quarterly rocks, which became sprints. They do like 2-week sprints to get things done. And it started out with, we're going to have 2 parallel sets of code. We're going to run Cold Fusion, and we're going to run .NET Core, and we're going to swap out the Job Seeker Center or the search capability or the email alerts, and we're going to change that from Cold Fusion to .NET. And so their team had a schedule. We're going to get rid of that. We're going to pretend we didn't see that schedule in there. Their team had a process whereby they were using a Kanban system, and they had a backlog of tasks that needed to get done. They would meet on a daily basis. So I don't recommend always meeting for daily. If you've got a high touch, if you're working on something that requires a lot of interaction communication, sometimes meeting for 10, 15 minutes in the morning will save you a ton of time. And that's what they did for a software development process. And these meetings were really just 3 questions, or three things that we would talk about. You would filter by team member. That team member would tell you, what they completed, what they're doing next, and where they're stuck. And then there'd be a little bit of back and forth. If there was required more conversation, then it would be sidebarred, and team members would get together to chat about it again. And that day-to-day process is what led them to the quarterly rocks and the every couple of week releasing big chunks of code and upgrading our system. For sales and marketing, that was a little bit much. I think you can probably, if you're really task-based, you can probably get away with weekly meetings. And we did that often. So we just have a to-do list, a doing list, and a done list, and we'd move things across. You can filter this list, so you can choose to view by person, you can choose to view by tag. So you could even incorporate your issues list into your to-do list and just have it as a filter, and then just choose which ones you show by that. And again, the weekly list, and this is sort of like, this can be done as a leadership team. You can also do it by department as well too. So, usually your leadership team will get together depending on how you're structured, and then your individual departments can use it for their specific tasks as well. But how do we identify, discuss, and solve issues? This is the same list we were talking about earlier, but here's kind of a meeting flow and sort of some good news. Start out with a meeting where everyone says hi and talks about something good that's happening. Talk about the clients, people, good news, bad news there, like what's going on. Kind of review your scorecard and your KPIs, what's happening in your business, are things going well? Is something coming undone? Do you need to take a look at it? Quickly look at your quarterlies, like what's going on? Is everything on track? And if any of that stuff, your to-do list, if any of that stuff is not working, then you don't discuss it at the beginning of this meeting. You just push it down to your issues list, right? And then you decide which priorities you have in your issues list, because you're gonna have 60 minutes to try to identify, discuss, and solve things. And if you can't do it right away, then you can move it into a future rock or something like that. But it's really important to just be quick in the beginning of these meetings so that you're focused on getting to solving problems and choosing what problems to solve. So here's a quarterly vision traction organizer. And so this is where you'd start to look at your 1-year plan, your quarterly rocks, and your issues list. Again, you can put all of this onto Trello. This is just the visualization that they use. And so the better you get at your weekly meetings, the less like surprises there'll be when you get together for a few hours to go over your quarterlies with your executive team. You'll just kind of know what's going on, but this is where you can discuss issues. You can talk about, is there any people issues, kind of review, what's going on in your company, and sort of get to a little bit of a higher level and make sure you're on track, make sure you know what you're going to do next quarter. And then your annual strategy. So, this one, I like to do a retreat or get away, like have people actually leave the office. We're working remotely, but if you have a shared office space or something like that, maybe do something different so you can get people out of their, out of their day-to-day. They're not looking at their computers or trying to get stuff done in the middle of it. It's really kind of like stepping away from your business and going, okay, whew, what a year. All right, what are we gonna do now? So long-term, like having that long-term vision. This is a horrible slide. I don't know if anybody can see what's going on there, but we've got, strategic plan, you've got your mission. It's basically just putting everything in one place. This can all be on one Kanban board. And so that way, you're always kind of reminded, you're always talking about your culture, your values, your mission, your purpose, what's going on. You're always kind of having that discussion, and you're always bringing things back to that, because ultimately, if you're doing things that aren't going to lead you towards your long-term objective, whether you're in person and meeting together or you're working in a virtual setting, you're just going to kind of go all over the place. And I don't know if anyone's experienced that. I've experienced that in my own business. It's not fun. And search for templates. So everything I've shared today, I found in about 2 minutes online, right? Like Google is your friend. And every platform, like whether you use Trello or Asana or all these different tools that are available for project management, they all have templates and things that are available for you to use. So you don't have to recreate these things. You can have them set up and running in 2 to 3 minutes. And here's some recommended reading. So Get a Grip is a story about a company, and it's about their journey in EOS. And I think it's really well done because it kind of gets you to see like all the stuff that goes wrong in your own organization. You go, Jesus, that's me. Scaling Up similarly has some great stories and some great tools. Year Without Pants was really cool. This is WordPress. So I don't know if anyone knows the story of WordPress, but it's always been a remote company, and Matt Mullenberg co-founded it. So Scott is a project manager that goes to work there and has to learn how to run with all these crazy remote developers that are all over the world. And so it's how he learned to do that. And these guys were remote before COVID. It was baked into their DNA. So just kind of listening to how they do things is quite interesting. 4-hour work week is more about like smaller business and automation and processes, but be warned, I ended up like leaving the country a bunch after 4-hour work week. I'd automated and set up process for everything so that like I would work out of Thailand, Vietnam, Central America. I was in Europe for a long time. So if you want freedom in your business, then that's been a really good one for me. Phoenix Project talks about DevOps. It's another story about how companies get efficient using Lean and Kanban. And if you don't want to read them, there's book summaries for everything. So you can just go do a summary of YouTube, and then if you like it, you can maybe read a little bit more, or you can just start looking at the templates and try one thing at a time. So here's my quote for for Tessa. Please nobody eat an elephant. Okay, I'm just going to lead with that. If you try to do all of the things at once, I've just shared with you, I hope I haven't like blown up anyone's brain or had anybody just completely tune out here. But you know, if you do these things one step at a time, and you know, it took me years to get somewhat decent at doing a lot of these different things. And if you just sort of choose one thing, like maybe, you know, if you're not doing a lot of meetings, maybe just start choosing a weekly meeting, right? Like start with that. Get it up on Kanban so that you can see it, or on a Trello board so that you can see it, and try it out. Get good at it. Keep it core to a few people. Who on your team are going to be the champions of transformation and change if you're struggling with technology? Who on your team gets technology? So finding allies. Who are the informal leaders within your team that can help you to execute on some of these things? Be strategic. If you just try to launch these things and to like change culture and how people do things overnight, you are just going to have a mass exodus or a revolt. So keep it contained, be strategic, and take your time. And with that, thank you. If anyone has any questions, they're welcome to reach out to, to chat with me now. You can also reach out to me by email. And yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. I had a couple that one by email and one in the chat box here. The chat one was something that I was thinking around is we were focused today on a lot of the tools that you can use to make this possible and to leverage that you can leverage the technology there. But there was a question around the human element of this, and do you have any thoughts on making sure people are using them and I mean, I think you touched on it's not really set it and forget it, but the question here is, yeah, they've had some experience where the staff needed more attention, more managing to kind of use the tools, and they kind of ended up undercutting a lot of the value of time savings if you're having to walk people through everything and kind of handhold them during that. So how much of that should you expect? There's going to be a learning curve, and then eventually you'll see the results of doing some of these tools, or are there leadership or management things you can put in place to kind of help so that the tools are actually saving everyone time and not creating more processes?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing, I do talk a lot about tools, but I would also say minimize them. My business partner and I would always kind of look at tools and say, do we absolutely need this, or can we do it with an existing tool? Right? Like I've kind of talked, like you could use, if everyone's comfortable with Google Sheets and you want to outlay all these processes using Google Sheets, I think that's fine, right? Because Google Sheets has chatting, it has you can at and assign things to different individuals. To me, it's clunky, so I would want to go away from that. But I will say that if no one's used to using these tools, it will be a period of adjustment, and it will require some strategy to roll it out. And it'll probably won't save you time right away, right? It'll probably, so I like to choose things that don't touch on a lot of things to start with. So if there's a couple of people that you know will get it quickly, then you can start there and roll it out into specific areas and get a few people using it. You know, but I do think if you just say, hey, we're doing this now without any thought, then it's probably not going to work. You kind of have to look at everybody on your team. You have to evaluate like where are they weak, where are they strong, you know, who's going to be an ally here, and build out an implementation strategy, right? You can either work with a consultant. I mean, I personally, I'm fairly good at technology, so I usually am able to adopt that with my team. and to find a path forward for everybody. But if you're struggling with that, maybe find a consultant or somebody that can come in and can work with your team, find out what the strengths and weaknesses are, and come up with a strategy. Initially, you won't save time. But if you start uncovering the problems, if you start documenting and creating all these checklists and things, you'll start to see where you're inefficient, and you can start to save. It'll take time, but you will save a lot more time, after maybe year one, right? Like it'll take time, and those will be your quarterly rocks, right? Like the changes that you make will be quarterly rocks. We'll take one. We're going to start doing a weekly meeting well, and we're going to take a quarter to get well at that, get that right, and then you can choose another one and move on.
I think that's a very good point. I think sometimes people see tools, and I've been victim of this, of kind of downloading Trello or back in the day Evernote or whatever, and being like, I'm going to put everything up there, and then within a day or two you're like, oh, for God's sakes, forget it, and then you tear it all down, and I think you're expecting it to be an immediate payback. But if you take the time, to your point of implementing and figuring out how are we going to use this tool to automate things or to maximize things, and kind of, if you want to amortize that time you're investing over the next number of years, then the savings, you'll see those for sure.
Well, and Trello, right? Like just using Trello as like a list, it doesn't really, sure, it's useful, but you kind of go, maybe I'll just go back to email, right? Like,
Yeah.
And so I think unless you have something like EOS, it doesn't have to be EOS. List management is list management. It doesn't have to be EOS. It doesn't have to be scaling up or any of these different types of processes, but finding a system that works within it, that everyone understands and it's easy. I think that makes it a lot easier. If you're just sort of using bits and pieces of it, then it doesn't really help. But the more you can like, Trello is wonderful if you learn all the different features and you start adopting different components of it. But if you're just going to kind of jump in with it, then it probably won't work. As I've seen too, when I try to jump in on ones, it doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of the tools we're talking about have been workflow and helping people be more efficient and that sort of thing. And I like your point of kind of, if you notice you're doing something manually over and over again, that should be a red flag that there's probably a way to automate that. I'm going to ask the elephant in the room, and it's okay because the elephant hasn't been eaten yet, so we can still say that. The elephant in the room, I think, for a lot of business owners or managers around remote working isn't the work is not just the workflow of making sure we have the tool to do things. It's the actual oversight of that, and the obviously you'll see if we're not meeting our quarterly rocks, if we're not achieving our goals, obviously there's a problem there. But I think more on what we've heard a few times is on more of that daily, the weekly check-in, being able to see what people are doing. You lose a little bit of that connection. For a company that's been working remotely with people all over the place for years, before it was a mandated thing, how did you as a manager kind of feel confident that you had your hands on what your team was doing, and that that you were getting what you needed to get out of them, and that you were maximizing their time and they were maximizing their time? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually going to sound kind of funny, but I didn't care as long as things got done. Right. So I wasn't worried about having somebody sit in front of their computer, or, if somebody on my team could find a way to automate processes, so they took a job from 8 hours to like an hour a day, I would probably find ways to get them to do other things afterwards and, get them to tell me how they did that. But I think that's wonderful. Right. So if you can be efficient and effective and you can start automating these processes, one, I'm probably not doing my job right if that's the case, right? Because I as a leader, I should be finding these efficiencies. I think it's good to have team members finding it. So I think building a culture that embraces flexibility, that embraces getting things done, opposed to being locked onto a computer. I've got a friend who actually has a computer that is monitoring their keystrokes and their attention, and I cringe. I would quit that job, right now. Right. So I think you need to give people the freedom and flexibility. It becomes a cultural change, and if you've got let's face it, if you've got issues in your business, you've got issues in your business, right? It's not about the process. It's not about the tools or anything like that. That just comes down to, do we need to coach? Do we need to provide training? Do we need to have hard conversations? Do we need to transition some people, right? We had people that just didn't work in a remote setting or didn't want to work in a remote setting. So we got really good at weeding them out in our interviewing process. Like if you don't want to work remotely, then you're probably not a good fit for our organization if that's what we're going to do. So that will be painful with COVID, right? Because you've been forced into remote, and then you kind of see, oh, we can do this way more efficiently and we don't need to go back to the office. But then there'll be some people that really want to go back to the office, right? And so if you're making that decision, then you might have some other hard decisions to make. And you can try to be flexible. Like we had Delina on our team, loved working from the office. So we had the co-working space at the BC Tech Association, right? And she could hang out with people there. I would come in on a regular basis. I kind of like 50-50. That was great for me, right? I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and I think to your point, I think it's put the tools in place, have the goals, and then follow up on that. And then if you have those, if they have the tools and they have the goals, and we're not meeting those objectives, and there's some underlying issues, and maybe it's coaching, maybe it's training, and sometimes maybe it's just not a right fit. But it's all the tools are a tool to be used by leaders and not just kind of put there and set it.
Yeah, and usually it's a leadership problem. Right? Like if that's not working, I mean, one of the biggest things I've had to do over the years when things weren't working in my business is look in the mirror, because it usually is something that I didn't want to change, or I wasn't willing to do, or I didn't know how to do.
Yeah. Ryan, thank you very much for sharing your experience. I mean, I think you as you said, you ran through all of this years before many other businesses were kind of forced to go in this route. So I think there's a lot of tools and tips that people can take away from your experience. So thank you, and appreciate you taking the time to come and chat with our members here today. Just a few wrap-up comments from me here. So thank you all for joining us today. If you, we will be sharing the recording, so you can go back and take a look at the items that Ryan has touched on. Again, reminder, this was a part of our Center for Burmese Business Recovery and Resilience. So I want to thank our sponsors who are part of making that program happen, and our annual partners as well, we can see on the screen.